I'm going to be very candid here and say that I had absolutely no interest in the original release of Shin Megami Tensei V. It was exclusive to a system that I didn't have nor wanted to spend money on, and the trailers were really not enough to convince me to buy a Switch for this game. The first reveal of the game was epic. You had the iconic dark silhouettes of a mountain of demons. It's the very iconic imagery that you tend to associate with the series. But it didn't feel like they were showing much. As more and more of the trailers started coming out, my interest very quickly waned after all that. It all just kinda looked like they were showing the same thing every time. This could merely be a symptom of revealing a game's development too early and panning out the promotional phase for too long. I didn't watch all the promotional videos for Vengeance, but I can tell you right now, the single trailer that I did see caught my interest a lot more. Now, it didn't absolutely sell me on it right then and there, it just had me curious to see what direction they were gonna take this in. I wasn't even planning to make a video on this game until much later, but somehow, this game was kind of able to reignite the spark I had for this series. A spark I forgot that I even had. This video is gonna be about more than Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance. This video is also going to be about what I saw in Shin Megami Tensei to begin with, when I started to lose interest, and how Vengeance restored my interest in the mainline series. If you only care about Vengeance, you can skip to the timestamp on screen. But first, let's address the main reason I kinda fell off the Shin Megami Tensei train.
Here at the end of all things, where do your loyalties lie? What path does your heart long for?
Alignments suck. They are ironically part of what got me into the series as well as what made me fall out of love with it. Alignment choices are a pretty core factor of SMT's identity. If I have no interest in that identifying trait, my interest in the series as a whole is going to run dry. I understand the whole point of alignments is that no solution is perfect and every one of them leaves room for some huge problem, but after playing a good handful of these games, you start to become really desensitized and jaded to it all. In the original Shin Megami Tensei, the alignment choices were a really novel idea. They can lead you down different paths, leading you to fight different bosses and different events of the story, albeit very briefly. The characters backing up each of the alignments didn't feel much like people. They were largely just walking, talking embodiments of their alignments. Again, though, it was very innovative for its time, and for Super Famicom RPGs in general. Shin Megami Tensei II is not a game that I've played. While I could just give my opinions on the endings based on someone else's summarization of them, judging the quality of something before playing it is a landmine that I am not going to step on. The only thing I'll say is that according to a lot of SMT2 fans, the best ending in that game is the one where you commit global-wide genocide. Then you've got the game that I started with, my first mainline SMT game, Shin Megami Tensei III Nocturne. So I've noticed Nocturne has been getting what I like to call the old Sonic Adventure treatment. What I mean is that the game is generally praised highly by the player base, but has been receiving a lot of scrutiny in recent days. Now, I do have my fair share of criticisms of this game. I'm not gonna get into it here though because I don't want to get too off topic. But I don't think we should at all undermine what made this game's implementation of alignments interesting. Sure, the characters weren't deep or anything like that, but you actually saw them grow into their ideologies first. You could tell Chiaki's obsession with power stems from her fear and sense of self-preservation. You could tell Isamu's desire for isolation came from the lonely nature of the Vortex world. Hikawa kinda had his whole idea planned out from the beginning, but that's clearly the intent. That's just a part of his character and backstory. Shin Megami Tensei IV, despite how much I like the game, probably has the worst alignment endings. Don't get me wrong, Jonathan and Walter are pretty alright characters. They're a much better implementation of what they were trying to do with SMT1's alignment reps. They have preconceived biases before starting their journey, but through the course of the game, they start to build off those more. My issue is just with the endings. Okay, what are your options then? Well, your chaos option is to unleash demons into the surface world, and then everyone will die. Probably. Okay, what's the law option? You can suck up the entirety of Tokyo into the expanse, then everyone will die. Alright, what's the neutral option? You migrate everyone from the surface underground, destroy the ceiling over Tokyo, and now the two societies must work together to rebuild a new world. But because people are people, they'll inevitably start fighting again. And also, if you pick this ending, you're basic. Is there another option? Why yes, there is. Instead of just consuming Tokyo, you can send the entire world into the void, and then everyone will die. And also, if you pick this ending, you're a quitter. What a terrible payoff for an otherwise solid game. Now, there are other games worth mentioning. I haven't played Strange Journey, but I've been told it has one of the best implementations of law, chaos, and neutral. Haven't played the Raito games either, but I've been told those games have some sort of spin on SMT alignments. And yet, I just can't seem to bring myself to care. As time went on and I played more of the games, the novelty of alignment choices and alignment endings really started to wear off. I understand the whole point is that no solution will ever be perfect, and there will always be room for some problems to arise that wouldn't happen in the opposing ideologies. But the discussion just became really tiresome for me. Like, I can never feel satisfied with my decisions, with both the game and the fucking nerds in the fandom telling me that by some technicality I'm wrong no matter what. It all just started to feel really pretentious. The funny thing is that the most meaningful implementation of alignments that I can think of isn't even from a mainline title. It's in Devil Survivor. I haven't played Devil Survivor 2 yet, so I can't really say anything about how it's done there. In Devil Survivor 1 though, instead of having strictly law-leaning and chaos-leaning characters, the different outcomes and options are presented with a bit more nuance. Atsuro is a character who gives off neutral vibes, and very much has a neutral mentality, but his solution to the problem is ultimately very authoritarian. He said, give humans the power over all the demons to help society, but what that actually entailed was giving that power to the government. Yikes. Now, as much as people like to tout one specific ending as the objective best one, I can honestly see the validity in not all, but a good amount of these endings. It's not a full-on case of every ending being equally bad. In other cases though, I've always leaned more towards the non-mainline games. Sure, most of them have only one linear path, but at this point, the alignment stuff was starting to feel like baggage to me. Just something to put you down after celebrating your victory. If I wanted something like that, I'd rather just have a bad versus good ending scenario at that point. But enough ranting. What about Vengeance caught my interest again?
What did I tell you about those hookers, boy?
I genuinely wasn't expecting to enjoy this game that much. If anything, the first hour and a half were shaping up to be pretty bad. Shin Megami Tensei V easily has one of the most boring intros I have ever seen in this series. Boring expository narration, the blandest introduction to the main cast of characters, the weakest build-up and foreshadowing to the cataclysmic event where the story truly kicks off. Hooray! I know plenty of people have already made comparisons to Nocturne with the original game, but this intro really does feel like a weaker version of that game's intro. The main difference being that Nocturne actually made you feel like you were in danger before sending you off into the other world. You had to explore this abandoned hospital where you just happened to stumble upon some demonic ritual shit and almost get killed by a demon. Then you actually get to see a glimpse of the Vortex world before blacking out. Here, it's just an empty tunnel and boom, you're there. but we're still not even at the point where the story really begins to pick up. No. I'd say it doesn't really start to get interesting until here. The first boss of the game just jumps out of nowhere, and then this strange girl comes in and saves your ass. Not only that, but Yuzuru also gets into the mix. Yeah, they just threw 2 human party members at you. Yuzuru doesn't stick around past the one fight, but it's cool seeing that these characters can actually fight for themselves. The rest of the first area is easily the least remarkable part of the game. I'm not gonna hold it against the game because it's the first one. The new Vengeance content is introduced very slowly into the first portion of the game, but the few glimpses of what was coming up ahead were enough to keep me interested. We meet one of the 4 new main villains, and the new girl, Yoko Hiromine, sticks around in your party for a while. So the one thought going across my head this entire opening section is, how are these women gonna fuck my life up? Now what happens next is what really shocked me. They made me like the characters. Yeah, would you believe me if I said they made these bland-ass individuals at the beginning of the game, like, interesting? They're not my favorite Atlus game characters or anything like that, but they do feel like a step up from the likes of... what was the last mainline entry? Oh! I'll elaborate on my thoughts on Yuzuru and Ichiro when I compare them to their original story counterparts later. So for now, I just want to focus on our 2 heroine characters. The heroine is a staple of many Megami Tensei games throughout the series, even non-mainline entries. This game, however, gives you 2, Tao Isonokami and Yoko Hiromine. Actually, come to think of it, they actually play a double role acting as our Law and Chaos reps for this game. It gets a little repetitive having these 2 comment on every alignment choice just to insert a disagreement between the 2. I will say, however, that I appreciate the writers not making these 2 hate each other. Tao and Yoko are able to disagree on things pretty civilly. Tao is this sweet girl who just wants to help everybody without hurting anyone or stirring the pot. Yoko is more defiant and willing to cause trouble to help the less fortunate or correct injustice with the status quo. Because this is an SMT game, she tends to see some pretty extreme stuff sometimes. Like, she straight up tells Tao that the best way to stop bullies is to just kill them. Girl. Towards the beginning, it's usually Tao giving her opinion, Yoko disagreeing, and then Tao sort of pulling back like, oh, you know, you're right, I'm dumb. But then Yoko assures her that she still values her perspective. It's sweet, honestly. There's even one particular quest in the third area that comes to mind where Tao actually starts to stand her ground more against Yoko's opposition. It's nice when the alignment reps aren't, like, at each other's necks. There aren't any alignment split points like the other SMT games until the very end of the game, but I wasn't really bothered by it. A split would usually imply some kind of falling out between the characters. While I'm sure they could have written out a different reason for such a split, I think we should cut the devs a break here. Consider the fact they already had to compromise this game by splitting it into 2 different scenarios. Okay, so now I just gotta figure out how to play this game. If there's one thing about this series that never gets old for me, personally, it's the press turn battle system. It's largely the same as the previous entries, but it's got some rule changes, specifically in how passing turns works. This definitely took some getting used to for me. In previous SMT entries, passing with all full press turns will convert one of them into a blinking turn icon, and passing again would then use up the blinking turn icon. This is meant to stop the player from spamming the pass turn command. In this game, passing will always turn any available turn icons into half-turn icons. There are ways to exploit the hell out of this, but in most cases, it's just a different way to approach and plan out your turns optimally. I wouldn't stick with this model moving forward personally, but I can live with it. Also had to start remembering I can guard now. A nice decision-weighing thing where I can either pass to conserve press turns or guard for the ensured safety. The Magatsuhi meter has a lot of potential, but I only ever needed 2 Magatsuhi skills throughout the game. At the very least though, these aren't anything overkill like Theurgies from Persona 3 Reload. They definitely get used just as much, but for kinda the opposite reason. There's a lot of variety in theory, but you kinda just stick to the stuff you know, and it gets the job done. The biggest thing I had to get used to though was the semi-open world side quest heavy format of this game. I'll be honest, I was not too hot on it early on. I'm a person who has a lot of trouble prioritizing tasks. It's part of the reason I'm so bad at getting videos out. It's not so much a problem with the game, but a problem I have with myself. It just kept reminding me of the frustration I deal with on a daily basis already. Now I can't even make progress in this video game without getting easily distracted. And yet, I just kept falling for it. I kept accepting side quests because it's obviously the way the game wants you to interact with it. Side quests are your best way of grinding, so to speak. They also grant you choices that push your alignment, unlock fusions, and even straight up recruit demons above your level and are straight up counters for the upcoming boss. Sure, you could theoretically bash your head into a boss and keep fusing until you force your way through the story, but you're kinda shooting yourself in the foot here. Eventually, I just decided to accept whatever quests I find, and whichever ones sound interesting to me, I'll do. It also left plenty of stuff in my back pocket in case I get stuck on a boss somewhere and need to step back from it for a bit. It becomes admittedly addicting, but in the most frustrating kind of way for me. I mean, this game got me to do way more side quests than SMT IV, so you might see that as a good thing. It's grown into a bit of a love-hate relationship for me. It might have started off a bit rocky, but after a certain point, something just clicked. Call it getting good, or maybe some fundamental thing about the game design that's too subtle for me to notice right now since it's only my first playthrough, but around the halfway point of the game is where the game went from a 3.5 star game to a solid 4-star game for me. I was more invested in exploring the map, doing quests, and building my protagonist. This was the point where I knew I wanted to at least say something about this game in a video. I was never going to make a huge video on it like some of the other games I've talked about, but I was committed now. I gotta see this through to the end. And believe it or not, even the plot started to get a pretty good grip on me once this game really started to form its own identity. My initial impression was that this game was trying to emulate Nocturne's appeal while also integrating some aspects from SMT IV, specifically the myriad of side quests, as well as hopping on to the open world trend that certain other Switch games at the time were capitalizing on. Starting from, I'd say, the end of the second area to the start of the third area is where I really started to feel like I could see the game on its own merits. And it's also at this point where I started to remember one of the biggest reasons I love this series. Every game feels truly unique. It's got that quality you can't get from other entries. It's all tied in a nice little bow with one of the most legendarily challenging final bosses I've faced in this series. In my playthrough, I ended up getting the Law ending, meaning that after Tiamat, I had to fight Tehom of the Void. From discussions I've had with people who went down the Chaos route, this boss is way harder than the one they had to do. Coming up with a setup for this boss was definitely a brain teaser. The game straight up gives you the option to lift the level cap from Fusion right before this boss. They knew what was up. It's not super boss hard by any means, but I came into this fight with demons that nulled almost everything. And still had to revive some of them because they didn't null the one thing that could kill them. Honestly, the most interesting part of SMT's gameplay is getting my ass whooped, finding a solution that absolutely slaps the boss around, then getting my ass whooped again in a later boss fight. There's no single solution to break the entire game, only parts of it at a time. One solution doesn't fit all, unless you're on New Game Plus or something. Dude, imagine the shock when I finally beat this boss, Nahobino rises to his throne, and then suddenly Lucifer shows up and he's like, yo, you wanna fight, bro? Are you fucking kidding me? I went through all that and now I gotta fight Lucifer too? I actually ran out of MP items, I had zilch. Thankfully, the fight was pretty easy. Victory lap, I guess. It was honestly exciting not knowing which ending I would get until the very end. I genuinely wasn't sure what I was in for when I got to the throne. Early on, I chose a lot of chaos options. Later in the game, I made quite a few law choices. At the end of the day though, I wasn't dissatisfied with the end result. Yoko not being present for the last portion of the game did kinda lessen my inclination towards her, as much as I love her though. The lack of a neutral option in the Canon of Vengeance is also a breath of fresh air. I know many people, including myself, usually end up defaulting to neutral because, you know, I'm not fucking insane. What Vengeance does instead is present a more humane version of order for Tao's perspective, while giving you more of a reason to hate the existing laws of the universe, and making you think, hey, you know, maybe we should just eradicate the entire system and start over, thus giving Yoko's perspective more credibility, even if it does look gruesome. C'est la vie. I think the reason for the lack of a neutral option is because this feels less like law versus chaos, and more like ideal versus real. These are not by any means the most profound endings in Megaten, far from it. I honestly wasn't really a fan of how they made this whole dramatic scene for Aogami's death, hyped up this new Nahobino form getting ready to kick ass and avenge her fallen friends, but then he just comes back at the end? Like, this is some last minute asspull stuff. And then Tsukuyomi is just written out of the plot in as little as a minute. But the endings did have me wondering, how well does this all hold up to the original? So I went back, I started a new cycle, and had to see for myself what the story was like. I've seen the original game's story get a lot of flack, and I just had to confirm for myself what the issue was. And, yeah. It's exactly how everyone I talked to about it described it to me. Remember when I said I was bored out of my mind during that intro? Imagine that, but for like, the whole first two areas. I don't know if I would have been able to sit through this on a normal playthrough. Okay, I think now's a good time to finally bring up these two chuckleheads. I genuinely liked the dynamic that these two had in the Vengeance canon. So in the original story, this line about Yuzuru really caring for his sister is honestly kind of a throwaway line. When his sister actually goes missing, he has the most mundane reaction about it ever. He sounds mildly upset at best. In Vengeance, however, he's fucking pissed, and he personally holds it against Ichiro because his sister protected him from the demons. Yuzuru goes through this arc of going through whatever lengths it takes to protect his sister, who is his only family, while Ichiro tries to redeem himself. This later evolves into Yuzuru leaving his sister in the care of more capable hands, and finding a new purpose in life. He resolves to protect Tokyo the way he would have protected his sister. Dude, he comes out to you as Naho binary with this new motivation in mind, and it's treated like a big deal. Ichiro earns Yuzuru's respect back and even motivates him not to give up when he's feeling at his lowest. He overcomes his fear of fighting demons and gains self-confidence. That's why I actually felt something when Ichiro later betrays Yuzuru. It makes merging with Tsukuyomi, who is Yuzuru's would-be partner to become a Nahobino, all the more powerful. Now let's take a look at these two in the Creation canon. Yuzuru is hardly present for most of the game. Instead of finding Miyazu, we're trying to find this girl who we've only known for 30 minutes. Most of Ichiro's development happens in the third area of the game, and it mostly just amounts to him simping for Abdiel. And then the revelation that Yuzuru can become a Nahobino, he's just like, okay, I guess I'm a Nahobino now. It really did feel like the Vengeance team looked at Yuzuru in particular and made fixing him their top priority. Ichiro's not as offensive, but he's not great either. You get to see him and Abdiel interact more, which makes their union more believable, but does that make me like him better? Not really. Largely because I don't like Abdiel to begin with. Overall, these characters don't even truly feel like the alignment reps of this game. The gods they back up are the ones who truly have their own convictions. The human counterparts largely feel like they just exist to merge with their respective gods. Speaking of which, let's actually address the race for the throne. A surprising amount of detail about this is glossed over in the Vengeance canon. Sure, the intro narration gives you an idea of how the last creator shaped the world and what some of these terms are, but they throw around a lot of these terms like demons searching for their knowledge without even so much as subtly implying what that means. They also gloss over Lucifer killing God, just a small detail. In the Creation canon, you had all these different gods competing for the throne, so that they can be top dog after serving under the old god for so long. They were all literally only cooperating out of obligation to their current ruler, who no longer exists. It very much parallels the very real idea of abolishing the current establishment, and reshaping it into what the new leader thinks the people need right now. Do we preserve the current system? Do we reform it? Or do we just tear it all down and start from scratch again? The overall conflict between the branches of Bethel is genuinely an interesting concept, but it's introduced way too late in the game. We waste most of the game on meaningless shit and trying to win a war that's already lost. In the Vengeance canon, the other gods aren't even really bothering. They just want to stop you. By the time you reach the Empyrean, you defeat the only real competitor for the throne before they can even merge into a Nahobino. Not to say that it's any less satisfying to beat them, revenge is revenge after all. It really does feel like they just expect the player to have played or watched someone play the original story. The ideals of our original competitors for the throne are also horribly developed. Don't get me wrong, the conclusions they come to make sense, but most of these alignments aren't even really elaborated on enough until right before they're about to enter the Empyrean. The conflict escalated too at the last minute in the story for them to really do anything meaningful with it. And to top it all off, I chose the humanity ending. I created a new world in my first cycle, so I figured this time I'd destroy it just for a tone shift. And it turns out, I didn't even have to fight Lucifer? Huh? You're telling me that I'm forced to fight Lucifer in the new story, where he's basically just a footnote, but I can just skip him in the story where he's supposed to be more relevant? And I guess this wasn't a mistake, otherwise they would have fixed it in this version of the game. Despite all of this though, I'd say it's still a good thing they left the original story mostly untouched as an option, especially after delisting the original game. It's not often in these re-releases where they let you experience the game with all its gameplay changes but without the new characters and events integrated into the story. I would much rather not have any more enhanced re-releases so people don't have to buy a full-priced game twice, but if they are going to keep doing it, this is probably a better approach than most of them. And with that, I think it's finally time to discuss where the franchise will go from here. I think the future of Shin Megami Tensei won't be a bad one. I'm being cautiously not doomer-pilled about it. I think the biggest takeaway from this game should be identity. I personally find Atlus games more enjoyable when they try to do their own thing. That's not to say no game should have anything in common with the previous titles, that's stupid. That's literally what makes it a series. What I mean is, it should do more than check off all the boxes. When I saw the trailers for the original Shin Megami Tensei V way back when, I thought, yup, that looks like a Shin Megami Tensei game. When I saw the trailers for Vengeance, I thought, oh, alright, what's this Shin Megami Tensei game about? I think the most frustrating thing about recent Megaten games is conformity. Sometimes it's in the gameplay mechanics, sometimes it's in the aesthetic, sometimes you just take entire boss lines from Nocturne and implement them here, even though you just remastered it around the same time. My biggest hope for future mainline SMT titles is that they don't try to replicate SMT V or Vengeance. Obviously, it should still have the bare minimum stuff like the press turn system, demon fusion rules, that kind of stuff. But it shouldn't be afraid to discard the status quo. The Atlus I like took risks. They meshed narrative, themes, aesthetic, and gameplay in ways that captivated me. I want Shin Megami Tensei VI to be unabashedly itself. It's so wild to me that the most unique Megaten games we've gotten in recent years were Persona 5 Tactica and Soul Hackers 2. And Soul Hackers 2 took quite a few aspects from Persona and tried selling them to the wider Megaten audience. Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance is about having the conviction to change the way things are done, and that no one system will last forever. Now I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, Atlus will keep this mindset moving forward. That'd be pretty nice.